NEC Hoops fans, welcome back to the NEC On the Run podcast. My name is Ron Ratner, and I'm joined by Ryan Peters, who you'll find on X at Pioneer_Pride. It's time, Ryan. 2 weeks left to go in the season. We've hit the home stretch. The standings are they're still tiered up, and we have so much to talk about this week after a pretty wild week of NEC basketball. Let's start right at the top. Merrimack made its surge last week, broke the deadlock with Central Connecticut. Now heading into the final 3 games of the season for them, have a 1.5 game lead on Central in the standings.
Yeah, and they continue to grind out wins, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat once again, this time at Stonehill. They outscored the Skyhawks 10-2 in the final 2 minutes, and it looked like Stonehill was going to pull off the upset win. And it's also the second straight road game where Merrimack's win probability was at 11%. In other words, it was not looking good for them. It would look like they were going to get the L and fall to, 9-3 in conference play, but they figured out a way to win at Stonehill. And, for me, Bud Clark is really becoming one of the best players in the NEC. He's a credible candidate for an all-conference first teamer, and that's really kind of rarefied air for freshmen. But 17 points in the win over LIU, and then 29 points in the come-from-behind victory against Stonehill. I mean, that go-ahead bucket, that long mid-range jumper with 9 seconds left to pull Stonehill ahead. You almost had that feeling like Stonehill just could not get anything offensively going in the final 2 minutes, credit the Merrimack zone. And you just had a feeling when Clark was bringing the ball up that he was going to make that shot, and that's exactly what he did.
Think about the confidence Joe Gallo has in Bud Clark as a freshman to put the ball in his hand at the end of each game. He did it against LIU the previous week in overtime. He did it against Stonehill, scoring the last 6 points of that game. How good do you have to be for a coach to just say, here's the keys, let's bring us home?
You have to be exceptional. You have to be in that rarefied air. You talk about guys like Marquise Reed and Kane Broom, and you're talking about like the great freshmen, even last year with Javon Bennett in Merrimack, Gallo trusted him, but he didn't really need as much out of Bennett because he had Jordan Minor and Ziggy Reed and those guys. But now you have a great duo in the backcourt, Bud Clark and Jordan Durkak. Both guys can go get you a bucket in isolation late in the game. That's a huge weapon for Merrimack, because you could now play matchups, right? You could play Durkak on the post against a smaller guard, or you could play Bud Clark in isolation, who's got that smooth mid-range game, who could get a pull-up jumper anytime he wants. So to have that weapon to go along with that Merrimack zone is just lethal for Joe Gallo.
Yeah, Bud Clark this week, the NEC co-player of the week. Here's a little tidbit, Ryan. He's just the 5th player in the history of the conference, the 5th rookie to also win player of the week. So when you say rarefied air, it really is. You don't see players getting this sort of notoriety. And you're right, having those 2 weapons at the end of the game is not something that every team has. And you know what? And if you're going to put all your attention on them, both those guys will dish it off to somebody else, to dish it off to a Tumnu, who'll throw it down when they need a
Yeah.
when they need a bucket as well.
Or Devon Savage in the corner for an open
Right,
three, right?
exactly.
So, I mean,
Yep.
they have offensively, they are just fine. Maybe there were some questions about Merrimack coming into the year about how many offensive weapons they would actually have. And, they'd have to grind out these wins. If they could hold their opponent to under 60, they got the W. Now their offense is humming pretty well because of Bud Clark, because of all the guys that we mentioned.
So as Merrimack finishes, they have 2 of their last 3 games on the road. Central Connecticut still in the mix for first place. Merrimack has hosted clinched hosting a quarterfinal home game. They're the only team that's done that so far. But let's look in the next tier in the standings. And I'm staring at them right now. And let's just go. FDU 7-5, Sacred Heart 7-5, Lemoyne 7-5, Wagner 6-6. So you're looking at most likely 4 teams battling for these last for 2 spots, unless Central would collapse. 4 teams battling for the last 2 home games heading into the final 2 weeks. Let's start by taking a look at FDU, which turned things around last week. Sweep. They beat LIU in overtime in an absolutely wild game. And then they hold serve against St. Francis, PA, bringing up 93 points at home.
Yeah, they lost their first 2 conference games too, right? And now, before you know it, they've won 7 of the last 10, and they are definitely in the conversation to get that first round home game. They win the dramatic elevator game at LIU, and then they just take care of business at, against St. Francis at home. And the offense is really humming right now. In the last two wins, they've shot 44 of 84 from two. They've had 40 assists to 24 turnovers in those two games, and they've gotten to the free throw line 53 times. So they're attacking off the bounce. They have a great jump shooter in Almonor, but they have great guys who could really get off the bounce, get downhill, and finish around the rim. And that's really showing. And we mentioned Almonor, 40 points in the two wins. Emmanuel, 27 points, 8 assists. That's unique for a big man, 6 steals. He had 5 thefts against St. Francis. And then Terrence Brown's an emerging freshman. We talk about Bud Clark, but Brown has really stepped up and provided a lot of offensive firepower for Jack Castleberry. 32 points on 21 shots, as well as 6 steals in those 2 wins too.
Yeah, I can't get enough of watching Terrence Brown play. He's just getting better and better. That's a foundational piece for Castleberry right there.
There were a lot of question marks about who would be that off the ball guard that's going to fill the role of Grant Singleton, right? Everyone talked about, Dimitri Roberts and, what's going to happen there. But Grant Singleton, his great shot making was a big question mark. And they had a number of questions. They had a number of guys that were going to come in and try to fill that 2 spot for FDU. And Terrence Brown, middle of the year, just stepped up, and he has not given up the role at all. He's going to be an all-conference, all-rookie team guy for sure. And he's playing with a lot of confidence right now.
Let's give a shout out, by the way, to Jameel Morris, who had not played since early January, comes in on Saturday against PA in a close game at the end of the first half, immediately scores 8 points, hits a pair of threes, has a really good game off the bench for them. And it just shows you when your time comes, you got to be ready to answer the call.
Yeah, and then Devontae Jameson he's been in a rut of late, but he played 15 valuable minutes for Jack Castleberry on Saturday, had 5 points, 5 efficient points. I think he's going to start to get more and more into the rotation once again. Braden Reynolds is a defensive first guard. Hero Bligans had his moments. So there's a lot of good pieces on this team, not just the guys like Sean Moore, Emmanuel, and Almonor, and also Terrence Brown. They got some guys that really solidify that second unit.
Absolutely. Almonor, just to point out, he scored his 1,000th point. Congrats to Ansley. He's the NEC co-player of the week this week. FDU on the upswing. Now let's turn our attention to, let's go to Syracuse and Lemoyne. Lemoyne had lost 3 of 4, but there they go again on Thursday, taking on Central Connecticut, looking for the sweep, and they pull out the close game in overtime, go on to beat Stonehill, win 2 at home. They are also in the mix, 7-5, heading into their final 4 games of the season.
Yeah, there's nothing like home cooking for an 8 champions team, and you do not want to play Lemoyne in the first round of the NEC tournament. So those Dolphins definitely want to get that matchup, that either 3rd seed or 4th seed in the first round of the NEC tournament, so they could play up in Syracuse and require someone to travel all the way up there because they're really tough at home. And I mean, against Central Connecticut, what a game. Kai Cleary, 21 points, 11 rebounds, but he hit 2 big-time clutch shots. I mean, that shot over Amos in regulation, Amos did everything he could defensively. Cleary just hit a really good shot, about 21, 22 feet from the basket to tie that game at 60 deep in regulation. And then they're down 1 in overtime, and he somehow hits a fadeaway jumper in the corner over Jaden Brown. And that was also a very high, degree of difficulty for that shot. So it really pays off when you have a graduate senior like Kai Cleary. We've talked about this in the podcast before, right? To have a guy who could score like that, who could make tough mid-range buckets when you need a guy, when the shot clock's going down, or you need to score late in the game to get you up a possession or tie it. It's just so critical to have a guy like Cleary.
Yeah, those were NBA level makes he's doing there. That fadeaway from the baseline is Kobe-ish, Jordan-ish, Jordan-esque. You could say what you want, but there's not many players that have come through here that can take that shot with confidence. And when it goes up in the air, you say to yourself, "Oh, he's going to make that."
Yeah, and Kobe Bryant was his hero growing up, right? And he's done a wonderful job emulating Kobe Bryant because he looks like Kobe Bryant. He swings the leg out. We talked about this when we interviewed him, right? He swings that leg out in his jumper, and it's so aesthetically pleasing. Even more pleasing, though, I'm sure, to Nate Champion, as the ball goes in a lot of the time.
Correct. Now, Lemoyne's been getting a lot of help. So you have, of course, Luke Sutherland has been on a nice roll as of late, doing it inside and outside. Isaiah Salter has upped his game in recent weeks. Now you're getting AJ Dantzler, the
Yeah.
freshman, giving
Mhm.
them some good minutes and some big buckets.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got had 14, 13, and 8 in the last three games. And two of those are victories. Another freshman who's emerging for sure. I mean, they have a lot of options. They have a lot of shot makers, but Dantzler gives them a guy who could actually finish off the bounce a little bit. He's got that quickness to his game. So just kind of complements Sutherland and Cleary and those McClure and those types of players. They have a whole assortment of offensive weapons, and it's definitely valuable to have coming into February and March.
Also, looking at the top of the standings, let's talk a little bit about Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart has a bye Thursday. They have to walk into Wagner on Saturday, a tough place to play. And Sacred Heart has really struggled on the road in league play this year, but they do it. They come away with a 63-53 win. That was a huge win for Anthony Latina and the Pioneers.
It definitely was not pretty. It wasn't pretty to watch, but they defended well enough to hold Wagner 32% from two, 33% from three. They limited the Seahawks to just three fast break points, which is really important because kind of containing Melvin Council when he's in the open floor is critical. They got back in transition D and did just that. And we haven't really brought his name up much throughout the year, but Kyle McGee really has played well
Yep.
for the Pioneers of late. He's been that graduate senior, that heady, high IQ veteran that Anthony Latina needed. He wanted McGee to come in and kind of help him in late game situations and kind of help them be a little tougher in the late game. And I mean, he's keeping them afloat right now, keeping them in the race for that 3 seed. His efficiency's spiked over the last 6 games, and he's averaging 11 a game in the last three, including a game high 17 against Wagner. And he also chips in 6 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 assists. He's a do everything guard. He kind of him and Joey Riley complement each other really well. You throw in Brendan McGuire, who also has a unique game as kind of a point forward. So they got a lot of uniqueness in that backcourt. McGee's certainly helped them a lot, and they're going to need McGee for the stretch run for sure.
In the towards the end of that game, we saw Nico Gallat emerge. Did not score in the first half. Gets all 9 of his points in the second half. A couple of huge shots down the stretch, and he did it on
Yeah.
the boards and on defense as well.
Yeah, he made that circus finish, I think, to put Sacred Heart up 59-51, which essentially iced the game at that point. But he's such a invaluable player. He's a fourth year guy. He's really athletic. He does a lot of unique things for a 4-man, and for him, he's a great rebounder at his spot. He's going to rebound the ball. He's going to push it up the floor. He can occasionally make a three, which he did at Wagner in that second half, and he's a really good finisher too. We talk about guys like Cleary and Bud Clark who could finish in isolation. Nico is just like that too. Gallat could definitely finish late in the shot clock. He's had his fair share of fadeaway jumpers or tough takes in the post. And he's a guy that, he needs to play really well. Joey Riley needs to play well. We mentioned McGee, Brendan McGuire. I mean, they have a bunch of guys. Aiden Carpenter came back from the flu last week. So they're also dangerous as well. You definitely want them. You don't want them at the Pitt Center at home in the NEC tournament. So teams are going to be fighting against that. That's a huge game. FDU at Sacred Heart next Thursday.
Yeah, there's 2 big FDU games this week at Sacred Heart Thursday, at Lemoyne Saturday. So that clutch, that coffee clutch of teams that are right there in the middle right now, hanging out together. Maybe we'll start to see, hopefully, we'll start to see some separation as we head into the final week. And look, even the teams towards the bottom can be dangerous. So as we've learned this year, 7 teams are in: Merrimack Central, FDU, Sacred Heart, Lemoyne, Wagner, and LIU clinched this past week. Only 1 spot left. SFU and Stonehill. SFU is 2 games ahead with 3 to play. So they're clearly in the driver's seat. Their magic number is 2, and they actually play each other on Saturday. So if St. Francis is not able to clinch on Thursday, a win over Stonehill would clinch that final spot on Saturday.
Yeah, that'd be a fun one, a must-win game for Stonehill. It'd basically be like an early playoff game, right? You win and you continue your season. If you lose, you probably have 1 game left and that's it.
It is, you look at the Stonehill's results, and boy, they are just competitive in nearly every game this year. I mean, right there. I'm looking at the last few weeks, losses by 3, 5, 9, 3, and 8. can't get over the hump. But boy, they put some scares into some teams, and we saw it with Merrimack last week that they had them, right. They was there for the taking in the final couple minutes.
Yeah, I feel for Chris Kraus. It's been a tough year. I mean, his team was decimated with injuries for the first half of the year. They finally got healthy, but it's taken his team a while to kind of gel and play with chemistry. And he's gotten a lot of inconsistency of his guys. That collectively, it's a really talented group, and they could pick off anyone any given night, as we saw against Merrimack. I mean, they were right there against Merrimack, up 5 with about 2 minutes left, and then credit the Warriors, their defense just shut Stonehill down. They forced him into some really tough, like long range jumpers at the end of the shot clock. And, Bud Clark found a way to win that game. But yeah, Stonehill has been a tough year for Chris, but they're much better than their record indicates.
Ryan, I want to give some appreciation now to a couple of players, starting with Wagner's Melvin Council Jr. Clutch with the ball in his hands at the end of the game on Thursday in overtime, banks in a runner with a couple seconds left to beat SFU.
He's one of the best scorers in the league, and if he's going downhill, whether it's in the mid range or in transition or just getting to the rim in the half court, he is lethal. He's one of the best scorers in the league, and we saw that against St. Francis.
And how about Eli Wilborn? Just putting up numbers game after game. He's now the rebounding leader in the league. He's in the top 3 in blocks. He's really had an incredible season, leads the league in double doubles. When you look at him now, we talked about him earlier in the year. Where do you put his upside when you look at some of the other really good young bigs the NEC has had in your time covering the conference?
I mean, you think about, I think he's a more talented offensive player, but you think about Josh Nebo at St. Francis. Nebo had a pretty good freshman year, but then had that defensive player of the year type of year as a sophomore, led the league in blocks, I think. And, Eli is certainly trending towards that, but Eli is a really talented offensive player. Despite the 2 losses this weekend, he had 18 and 16 in those 2. And he's really good in the post. He could run the floor. He's athletic for his size. He's in the top 75 in the country in block rate, in top 100 in offensive rebounding rate. You just cannot keep him off the glass and off the low block. He's just that dynamic. He's got such a wonderful blend of quickness and athleticism, but also toughness and brute, right? I mean, it's a perfect combination. And yeah, his upside is immense. He has player of the year potential down the road, without a doubt. I have no doubt about that, given his all-around game on both ends of the floor.
Agreed. Last player I wanted to talk about was Tanacopa on LIU. He has hit some big shots this year. He has seemingly developed into his role, and they do a really good job, LIU, at finding those gaps in the defense to open him up for good looks.
Yeah, he's a great three-point shooter. It was kind of difficult for him early in the early going, but now shooting 39% in league play from deep, and also shooting 49% from 2 in league play as well. So he's using that 6'6" frame of his to his advantage in the mid-range game as well. But yeah, Ty Strickland and Terrell just came back from injury. They're great slashing, getting into the paint and kicking out, and that's the perfect complement for Copa. Copa could just kind of sit there in the corner, sit there on the wing, wait for one of his slashers to feed him the ball, and he'll just hit an open catch and shoot 3 all day.
All right, that was a lot to chew on. Now let's go to our NEC Open Mic, where we'll be joined by guest Ansley Almonor of FDU. It's now time for our NEC Open Mic, and we welcome in FDU junior forward Ansley Almonor. Ansley, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me today, man.
All right, let's talk about your week last week, and specifically, I wanted to talk about your game on Saturday, a 93-74 win over SFU. You caught fire in this game. You made your first 3 jumpers, wound up hitting 5 threes, and you finished 8 for 11 from the field. Was it one of those games where you kind of knew right off the bat that things were going to be falling for you in this one?
Yeah, I had my first shot was pretty contested, and then when I felt the season going, I'm like, oh, it might be a good night tonight. And the next couple started going in and stuff, but unluckily for me, I got into foul trouble, so I wasn't even able to, really do as much as I wanted to. But I can't have everything.
21 points in 21 minutes, nothing to sneeze at right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Ansley, you've been so efficient and consistent through your 3 years at FDU, and that's impressive to me because you've had 3 different head coaches each year. I know you've always been a great knockdown shooter. You've done that since you set foot, at FDU. But what's one thing in your game that you've really improved upon going from back from freshman year to now?
Just like playing more off of closeouts, trying getting downhill, getting into the paint and the in between areas, being able to make shots in those areas, having good touch around the rim. I think that's something I really improved on since getting here.
Yeah, so I mentioned the three head coaches, Ansley. Compare and contrast Tobin and Jack for me, because you get Tobin, it's a 4-win team. He comes in from St. Thomas Aquinas and revamps the roster. Obviously you had Grant and Dimitri come onto the team, and of course Sean, as you guys call him, Fuzz, and you guys had great success, running up tempo, pressing. But now, what's been the biggest difference between going from Tobin to Jack? I know Jack was an assistant under Tobin, so it's kind of been supposedly a seamless transition. But compare and contrast those two guys for me.
Like system wise, it's not really that different. You're basically running the same system, same offense type of thing. Defensively, we're still full court pressing, but personality wise, they're pretty different. Tobin's more like up tempo, a lot of energy, upbeat. Jack is more mellow, talk, like he'll have a conversation with you, like quiet. He's like, cool. But Tobin, he's really like up tempo, upbeat, and he really wants you get it done his way and get it done fast and stuff like that.
Tobin can get on you in practice, right? I've seen him before.
Yeah, he definitely could, but Jack could too, though. That's some things people don't know about Jack. Jack definitely could get on you during practice.
All right, let's talk, Ansley, a little bit about the art of the three-point shot. You're making 42% of your threes in league play. Sat there watching the skills competition, the three-point shooting competition in the NBA over the weekend. Let me throw this at you. If you're out there, let's just go, you're taking 100 threes, 20 in each spot, no money balls. How many of those 100 unguarded are you going to make in that session?
20. I feel like I'll make like over 80. I think 80 is like probably the minimum I'll make. I'll make over 80.
That's not bad. That's not bad. 80. Is anybody else on the team doing better?
No, I don't think anybody. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to your team. Big overtime win over LIU. You've had a couple of OT wins, a couple of very close victories this year. How much is your experience and this team's experience over the last 2 years playing in big games? Obviously, last year we know what you played in the the NEC title game. You went on to win NCAA games. How can your team lean on that experience to help you in close games this season?
We definitely have been leaning on our experience towards the end of these games because we have a lot of players who came from last year. We've all been through these types of games before. We've been through the tournament, like you said. Like we all try to come together when it comes to these moments. We trust each other. We know what it takes to get it done. So I think we've definitely been leaning on that a lot recently because a lot of these games have been coming down to the wire.
Speaking of big games, I know Ryan interviewed you for a piece that's going to appear in the NEC tournament program this year. It's an oral history of your win over Purdue last year. And it's a fascinating, I've read the final article. It's a fascinating read. Ryan, you did a great job. And you and your teammates and your coaches and people associated with the game I get goosebumps reading it and thinking about it. What I want to ask you is, when you look back on that experience last March, is there one singular moment, that one moment, whether it was in the game or after the game, that you always come back to and say, and just go, wow, that was the most memorable thing from that time?
Oh, one singular moment that's a good question. I think after Meach got the block and then he headbutted the stanchion, I was like, oh wow, like we're really gonna win this game. Like this is crazy. Like it was crazy. Like that was one moment that really stood out to me because Meach, he's not like that tall or anything. For him to get a block, that's when I knew it was over.
Have you watched that game in full since then by yourself or with your teammates?
Oh yeah, I definitely have watched it again. It's crazy to watch because it's like in the moment you don't even feel it, you don't even realize it, but like when you look back on it, it's like wow, we really did that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And Ansley, you did a wonderful job fronting Zach Edey that entire game. You're giving up 8 inches, 90 pounds. Be honest, did you have to hit the ice bath after that one?
Oh yeah, we actually did have to take ice bath after that game. He's a big guy. He's huge. He's a big guy for sure.
Yeah, you did a wonderful job just fronting him and keeping him, making him uncomfortable, of course, and the double and the triple teams definitely helped too. But one thing I love about your game as well, you came in as a freshman, you have a smooth mid-range game. You could get to your pull-up at any spot, inside the arc. It's kind of a lost art these days. How are you able to develop that part of your game to a point where it's a weapon now? Was that something that you had in high school and you developed it over time? Take me to that kind of, how you developed your mid-range game.
Yeah, it's something I did haven't like I've had it for a long time, but I feel like my confidence over the years in taking that shot has just grown more and more, just within more reps, more practice of it, doing it more in like games and workouts and things like that. Like your confidence just grows. So I feel like my confidence just keeps on growing with that. Just more reps, the more times you see it going in, it's just the more times you feel like you could do it. So I feel like that's just my confidence is just definitely grew when it came to my mid-range game.
How much has your mid-range game helped in the fact that defenders they can't stick you on the three-point line the whole time if they're worried about you blowing by them?
Yeah, it definitely does help. I'm starting to realize it. Like, I feel like it's harder for defenses to like really like pick which one like they want me to take. I feel like in my mid range, I can really, like you said, I feel like I'm really good in my mid range too. So it's like, which one do you want to choose? My three or my mid range, you got to pick your poison. I feel like at a certain point.
Yeah,
So let's
quick
look.
analytic. Sorry,
Go
Ron.
ahead.
Quick,
That's
quick
okay.
analytic. Ansley's shooting 50% on his mid-range twos this year, which is an incredibly high number. So that is, you tackle closeout Ansley, and you're going to make him pay.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I work on. Just the work.
Nice. Ryan's always got the numbers, Ansley. Always. All right, let's wrap this up. I want to talk. You have 2 weeks left, and before we actually started here, we were talking about it. 2 weeks left in the season. You are 7-5. You're in a third place tie. I know it's important to secure a top four spot and host that first round game at the Pagoda Bank Savings Center. You've won 7 of 10 now, so you're on the right path. What has been clicking for your team, and what do you do? What do you need to do over these next 2 weeks to put yourself in a position to make a run at the NEC championship?
I feel like more recently we've been trying like putting full games together because earlier in the conference I feel like we were having either a good half or a good segment, good like 4 minutes, a good media 4 minutes, or like a good run or something like that. But I feel like now we're starting to put together full games of us playing our brand of basketball and just putting them together. Like last game, I feel like we played a good 40 minutes. We were able to build a lead and just continue to build and build and build. I feel like if we continue to build off what we played on last game and the game before, just continuing to play our basketball for the whole 40 minutes, I think we'll be in good shape.
There you heard it from Ansley Almonor, the NEC co-player of the week on a dangerous FDU team as we enter the final stretch of the NEC regular season. Ansley, thanks for joining Ryan and myself today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, we'll see you down the line.
See you.
Ryan, what a great chat with Ansley. He's a terrific interview. And we talked about how you interviewed him for this piece, but very insightful.
Absolutely, yeah. He's a high IQ guy, and he's making threes, making mid-range shots. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's a threat everywhere on the floor, and it just helps FDU space the floor out, especially when you have a five-man like him making shots.
This week on NEC TV, it's actually the final regular season men's game of the year. CBS Sports Network this Sunday at noon, Spiro Sports Center. LIU visits Wagner.
Yeah, a clash of styles, right? You have LIU who loves to run up and down the floor, play offensive basketball. They want to get into the 80s with you. Wagner wants to do the opposite. They want to grind it down to like under 65 possessions for the game. They want to make it a defensive battle. So for me, it's going to be, how's the pace going to be? Is it going to favor LIU where they're going up and down the floor, or is it going to favor Wagner? It's going to be, a fascinating matchup. You have, Ty Strickland, against Javier Esquerra. I assume they're going to put Esquerra on Strickland, and Esquerra is one of the best defenders in the league, I think, on the ball. And so, how is he going to kind of bottle up Ty Strickland there? You got, his counsel going to be on Tana Copa. We just mentioned him earlier. Kind of Wagner loves to limit 3-point attempts. Obviously, Copa just kind of he lives out there in the perimeter. So it's going to be a fun matchup, compare and contrast between Rod Strickland and Donald Copeland.
Ryan, we packed a lot in this week. I'm so excited for these last 2 weeks of the season. It's going down right to the end. and I'm working on my tiebreaker grids. It's the fun time of year. We're almost at March. I mean, let's go. Let's get this tournament started.
It's going to be fascinating because the race to the number 3 seed, I think, is going to be critical in this league because you'd probably rather play Central Connecticut in the semis than Merrimack, right? You'd probably don't want to face Merrimack until the finals of the NEC tournament. No disrespect to Dietrich Gymnasium, the Blue Devils have had a great year, but for me, Sacred Heart Lemoyne, FDU, and even Wagner to a degree, they're all trying to get that 3 seed and get a home game. It's going to be fascinating the last couple of weeks.
All right, there you have it. NEC on the Run podcast. We'll see you next week.